Welcome. Thank you for joining today's Patient-Provider Dispute Resolution webinar, focusing on the provider journey and the PPDR process. Starting January 1st, 2022, provisions in the No Surprises Act began protecting uninsured or self-pay individuals from unexpectedly high medical bills. Providers and facilities are now required to furnish a good faith estimate of expected charges after an item or service is scheduled or upon request. Throughout this presentation, the term providers also includes providers of air ambulance services. The good faith estimate should include a list of items and services grouped by each provider or facility reasonably expected to be provided for the primary item or service, and items and services reasonably expected to be furnished in conjunction with the primary item or service for that period of care. On the good faith estimate, there is a place where providers can include contact information in case the parties initiate the PPDR process. We cannot stress enough how important it is for providers to include an email address or contact information for someone in their organization who can be responsive to the PPDR dispute information request they will receive if their patient engages the PPDR process. Please, on the good faith estimate, include an email address or contact information for someone in your organization who can be responsive to the PPDR dispute process. The patient-provider dispute resolution process is available for uninsured or self-pay individuals to dispute a bill for an item or service that is $400 or more than the item or service's expected charges found in the good faith estimate they received. Under the PPDR process, an uninsured or self-pay individual or their authorized representative may initiate the PPDR process for determination about how much to pay a provider or facility for specific items and services. The goal of this webinar resource is to walk providers and facilities through some of the most common scenarios a provider or facility may encounter when engaging in the PPDR process. We will demo these scenarios showing emails providers and facilities may receive, steps providers and facilities should take in each instance, and what interacting with the portal may look like for each scenario. With that introduction, I'll turn you over to Katie Baker Ramirez to start the walkthrough.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everybody. Like Jenny just said, I'm going to walk you all through some different scenarios that you may encounter if you do have a patient that does engage the PPDR process. So on this slide, it's just explaining the three main scenarios that we're going to talk about today. So for scenario number one, this is a scenario where a dispute is created, the provider or facility completes the initial information request, and then no further information is needed. In scenario number two, the dispute is created, the provider or facility completes the initial information request, and then additional information is needed. And for scenario three, the dispute is created and a settlement is reached outside of the PPDR process. And at that point, the provider or facility would submit settlement information. So for each of these scenarios, what I'm going to do is kind of walk you through what these communications are going to look like. So I'll show you some example emails that have been created with test information. And then I'm going to walk you through in each of these scenarios what it's going to look like to complete the web form that you're going to need to complete for that scenario. So some of the scenarios may have some overlapping emails because you're going to get some of the same emails every time. So I'm going to highlight for you in each scenario the new emails that you might get, and then what the additional web forms are going to look like that you might have to complete. So let's talk a little bit more about scenario number one. So this is a scenario where the dispute is created, initial information is submitted, and then no information is needed. So a good description for that scenario is that the provider or facility receives an email stating that they are party to a payment dispute that is eligible for the PPDR process. It has been assigned to a selected dispute resolution entity or an SDRE, and that initial email is going to explain how to submit the information that is needed to start the process. So for this scenario, there are two emails that you would receive. The first email subject is payment dispute is eligible for dispute resolution. So this is like the first email that you're going to get. This is the only email that the provider or facility receives telling them that they are a party to a dispute in the PPDR process. And it lets you know that the dispute is eligible for the PPDR process. So we're going to walk through that one in just a moment. And then after that, in this scenario, because once that initial information is submitted, if there is no need to come back to you for additional information, the next email that you would receive would be the PPDR dispute determination notice, which would give you a notification of what is the outcome of that dispute. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to toggle over to a document that I have open that is just going to walk you through some examples of the email. So in this scenario, I'm really going to highlight this initial email that you're going to receive as well as a resolution email. And then I'm going to walk you through what that web form is going to look like when you complete the initial information request. So you can see in my Word document here, I have the subject. So the subject is payment dispute is eligible for dispute resolution. And it's going to give you one of the important things that you'll kind of note is this PPDR reference number. And you'll see that throughout. But that is an important piece of information that you may need in the future when communicating about your dispute, or if you do have to submit some additional information later. So this is just letting you know that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services have received a patient-provider dispute resolution and it is eligible for review. It's going to give you the name of the SDRE. So in this scenario, it's C2C Innovative Solutions. It's giving you their contact information. And it's also going to let you know throughout that if you have questions about anything, in this scenario, it's talking about questions about the SDRE, it's going to give you their email address. I'm sorry, not their email address, excuse me. It's the email address to ask questions, which is the federal PPDR questions at cms.hhs.gov. So that is the email address that if you have questions about the dispute process that you're going to use. The next part of this email here that I want to focus on is this next steps. So this is going to let you know a little bit more about what the dispute is. So it's going to give you the last name of the patient. It's going to give you the date the initiation notice was received. So that would be the date that that patient started the process. And then it would also provide you with the last 4 digits of the reference number, invoice number, or account number on the bill that they received. And then the items or services under dispute. And then it's also going to let you know what your next steps are, which was within 10 business days of the email, you need to submit to the SDRE the following information. So it's asking you for a copy of the good faith estimate provided to the patient, a copy of the bill sent to the patient, and then a justification for why the billed amount was appropriate and based on circumstances that couldn't have reasonably been anticipated when the good faith estimate was provided. There is a link in the email that's a hyperlink. So right here where it says submit this information online, that's where you're going to click. And we're going to go over and demo that in just a moment once we get through the rest of this email. So that's where you're going to click to submit that information. And it's also giving you a reminder that you do have to submit within 10 business days. The next section within the email is talking about settlement process. So at any point during the dispute resolution process, the patient and provider or facility are free to settle the dispute on their own. So if you would happen to reach a settlement with the patient, you can notify us of the settlement. There is another link here, and we're actually going to go over this in the third scenario, but there is another hyperlink here in this initial email that you will receive that you can fill out information about your settlement. You can also, again, contact federal PPDR questions at cms.hhs.gov for any questions. And this is also going to let you know here as well that C2C Innovative Solutions, which is the SDRE in this example, has stated they have no conflict of interest. So it's just letting you know that that has been already determined up front. It's going to give you the link to the No Surprises website that you can visit for additional PPDR resources. And you're going to have that in every email. We're going to have that link in there for you. And then also, again, it's just going to remind you that anytime you have questions, you can reach out to federal PPDR questions at cms.hhs.gov. And you always want to reference the PPDR reference number. So at this time, what I'm going to do is we're going to switch over to the web form, which was that link that I showed you earlier in that email, which is where you're going to submit your initial information. So when you get that first email, like the email said, you have 10 business days to submit the initial information that's asking for. And when you click on that link, it's going to take you to a web form that looks just like this. So you'll see the CMS logo. It's going to say, welcome to your patient provider dispute response form. And it's letting you know to use this form if you are a provider and facility and you have received a dispute acknowledgement email or need to provide a response or additional details to a dispute. It's also giving you that same federal PPDR. Well, actually, this is the federal PPDR initiation at cms.hhs.gov email address that you can use. And this would be if you have any questions about the web form. So that's letting you know if there's something in here that didn't make sense to you. If you had a question, you could do that. Before starting, one thing that we like to kind of remind you of is that you probably will want to have all this information ready before you start this process. You will need to upload documents. The file size limit for these documents is 500 MB for each file. And file types are limited to Word, Excel, PDF, JPEG, and PNG. So you would just want to check your files and make sure that they meet the file types and size limitations before you get started. So some of the information you may need to provide is a copy of the good faith estimate, a copy of the bill sent to the patient, and then a justification for why the billed amount was appropriate and based on unforeseen circumstances that could not have reasonably been anticipated when the good faith estimate was provided. You do have 10 business days from the date on the notice to submit your response. And then another reminder that I just wanted to point out to you here is that you do have 60 minutes. So the way that this form works is that you have to submit it in a single session. And that's for security reasons and for the protection of your personal data. So after 60 minutes, it will time out for inactivity. So that's why we do kind of remind you to kind of have those forms gathered up and ready to go for when you go to submit this form. So the response process is you'll complete this, you'll receive an acknowledgement email, and then you will, after your response is reviewed, you'll get a follow-up with a determination of the instructions or determination of that dispute. So I'm going to go ahead and you can, of course, read through all of the agreements and things that are here. And then once you are ready to proceed, you can go ahead and click the checkbox and click continue. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to kind of walk you through how you would fill this up, how it looks to click. It's very user-friendly, but I'm just going to walk you through it with using some kind of like just dummy information. So when you use this form, you'll need to respond to and submit to the information referenced. And this is just a question that asks you here, does the good faith estimate contain contact information for the healthcare provider or facility? So you can say yes or no here. So I'm going to go ahead and click yes. It's going to give you information about the patient. And normally it would show you also the account number from the bill, but because we're using a test scenario, we did not have one. And then here are the areas where you can upload the information that we were giving you or asking for previously. So for the good faith estimate, we can go ahead and click upload files. And I have just something that I'm just going to upload here just to show you what it looks like. So it works very similarly to pretty much any other program where you have to upload a file. So it's pretty user-friendly. So you just go ahead and click upload, select your file, and then it goes there. You can also drag and drop files if that's a little bit easier for you. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the healthcare provider bill. I'm just going to go ahead and select it. It'll automatically upload. You can click done. So you can tell that your files have been uploaded when you see them listed here, and then you have an option to delete. So if you would have accidentally maybe picked the wrong file, and needed to delete it, you could delete and then start again. There's also a blank space here where you can provide any kind of justification if you wanted to type something out. I will say there is a limitation in here on characters. So if you do have a larger justification, there is an uploading file option here as well that you can upload. So this is your section in here for your justification. So once you have everything filled out, I would recommend just double checking it just to make sure you do have the right documents uploaded. Then you can go ahead and select submit. If you would decide that maybe you wanted to exit, like before you submitted and you were going to start again, like maybe you didn't have everything together, you could always exit and then start again, as long as you do it within that 10 days. But once you select submit, you will get a confirmation screen. And it's just letting you know the next steps. So I'm going to go ahead and you can, if you want to, choose to print a PDF version of that if you would like to do that for your records, or you can just exit. So this is just letting you know that, you will get, further communications about the process as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click exit. And when I click exit, it just actually navigates me back to the CMS website and takes me back to this page here that you see. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to toggle back over to our emails. And now I'm going to show you what the final determination email looks like. So in this scenario, once you submit that initial information, like we just did with the good faith estimate and the bill and our justification, if the SDRE does not feel that they need additional information from you, that is the only information that you would have to submit. So once the determination is made, you'll receive an email that says PPDR dispute determination notice. And if you see on my screen here, I'm going to kind of walk you through what this means and what you may see. So it's just going to basically let you know that, decision has been made. And you can see right here in my email, it's either going to say that you as the provider has or has not provided credible evidence. So it's going to be one way or the other. And then it's going to also give you, like right here where you see explanation, there will be more of an explanation that's personalized to your dispute that would show up in this email. So that's where it's going to kind of give you the explanation. And then it's going to let you know that the patient, and in this example, the patient is Delinic Test, they must pay one of the three options that you see here. So this is potentially like you would see one of these three options. So it would say something like they must pay, a dollar amount, which is the total expected charges from the good faith estimate minus the $25 administrative fee that the patient paid. Or it may say the dollar amount, which is the billed amount, and that's what they have to pay. Or it may say they must pay a dollar amount, which is the median amount for the same or similar services by a same or similar provider in your local area, minus the $25 administrative fee that the patient paid. So basically, this email is going to outline whether or not the provider has or has not provided credible evidence to demonstrate the difference between the amount billed and the good faith estimate. And then it will also show you what the patient must pay. So it's going to list that all out in this email for you. And then it's also letting you know that the patient must pay you as the provider directly. And it's again giving you some more information about the decision being binding and about the No Surprises website. It's going to refer you back to the No Surprises website if you would like some additional resources. And then again, for questions, it's going to ask you to contact federal PPDR questions at cms.hhs.gov and include your PPDR reference number. So that ends scenario number one. So now what I'm going to do is toggle back to the slideshow. And we're going to talk more about scenario number two. So scenario number two is really building on that first scenario. So in this scenario, the dispute is received and the additional information, the initial information has been submitted. But if the SDRE needs additional information from the provider or facility, the provider or facility will receive an email with a link to submit that additional information. So let's look at the breakdown of the emails received here. So you'll initially receive the payment dispute is eligible for the dispute resolution email, which we just walked through, right? So we just walked through that and how you fill out that web form. But in this scenario, if more information is needed, you'll also receive a follow-up email that says action required, information request regarding your PPDR dispute. So that's what I'm going to demo for you in this scenario, is what that web form looks like, where you're asked to submit additional information. Once that additional information is submitted, you will receive an email that says the PPDR provider information received. And that means that as the SDRE received your information. And then a potential other email that you might see if needed is that if the SDRE has not received the information after 5 days, you may get a reminder that you still need to submit that information and you have 5 days to receive that information. So I'm going to show you what that looks like, that email looks like as well. And then at the end of the process, just like we saw in scenario number 1, you'll receive the PPDR dispute determination notice, which is the outcome of the dispute. So I'm going to toggle back to my emails document. And I'm going to scroll down again, and I'm going to show you. So again, like we talked about, here is the payment dispute is eligible for dispute resolution. And since we just went through that one in detail, I'm not going to go through this email in detail like I did in the first scenario, but I'm going to scroll through. So once you receive that email, we'll assume that you went in and you did your initial information, just like we demoed. But let's say now that the SDRE has determined that maybe you forgot something. In this scenario, it's saying that they still need a copy of the good faith estimate. So the email will say action required, information request regarding your PPDR dispute. And then it's letting you know the selected dispute resolution entity, C2C, reviewed the patient provider dispute and determined more information is needed to process the dispute. So it's asking you to submit what is needed. So this section right here where it says a copy of the GFE is needed, this would be customized to whatever the SDRE is asking for. So in this scenario, it's just saying they need a copy of the good faith estimate. So maybe what you submitted, maybe you accidentally submitted the wrong thing, or maybe just it was missed, or maybe they just need a clearer copy or something like that. So it's asking for a copy of the GFE. And it's letting you know here that you have 10 business days, and it's giving you a link, which we're going to demo in just a moment. And it's asking you to include your PPDR dispute reference number. And then again, once you get it, you'll get a confirmation, which we'll look at as well. And then the rest of the email just gives you the resources to visit the No Surprise website. And then also, again, contact federal PPDR questions at cms.hhs.gov for questions. So now what I'm going to demo is what this web form is going to look like. So if you do happen to have a dispute and additional information is needed once you do submit your initial information that was requested, you'll get this link. So now that's what I'm going to walk you through, what this link is going to look like. So I'm going to go back and demo that now. And it's going to be a similarly looking web form. You'll see the CMS logo in the top left, but this one is called the Patient Provider Request for Additional Information. So it's letting you know, again, who should be using this form. If you're a patient or provider and you received a request for additional information, it's letting you know, about getting help and to go to the federal PPDR questions at cms.hhs.gov. And a kind of another reminder here to have your things ready before starting, talking about the file limitations and things like that. So for this one, you actually have 15 minutes. So you want to make sure that you have that information ready. So I'm going to scroll through just like we did before. And I'm going to select the checkbox to agree to the, terms and conditions of use. I'm going to click continue. And in this scenario here, it does ask you to actually put in your dispute reference number. So you would get that from the email. So I'm going to type in the one here for this example. And click continue. And once you do that, it will bring up the form. So it's showing you again, like what you may need to add. And this one, it just says test, but we know we need to add the good faith estimate. So you may see some additional information here if it's asking you for something specific. But you can look at the information here, upload any files that you need to upload. So in this example, I'm going to upload the good faith estimate because that's what it was asking me for. So I can click upload, select my file, or you can drag and drop either way. And just like we saw with that initial submission of information, once your file is uploaded, you will see it listed here, and then you'll have this delete button. So that's the best way for you to tell to make sure that it actually did upload. And then once you have everything in here, if you don't need to submit anything else, you have everything in here that you need, you're going to go ahead and select submit. And you'll receive another confirmation, which is going to look pretty similar to the one we saw before. And it's letting you know that you've completed the process for submitting the requested additional information and what the next steps would be. So the next steps is the SDRE will review and verify your response. You'll receive a confirmation email. If you would like to print this for your records, you could select print PDF. And if you want to exit the web form, you can just click exit. If you would need additional information again or something, or some kind of clarification, the SDRE would contact you again. So I'm just going to go ahead and click exit here. And again, it's going to take me back to the CMS page here, you see. And now I'm going to go back and let's keep walking through the emails that you might get. So once we submitted that additional information that was requested, you will get an email that says PPDR provider information received. So it's just letting you know that they received that. You don't need to take any further action at this time. It's being reviewed, but it's letting you know that it was received. This next email that I'm going to show you, this is one that you may or may not get. It's just kind of depending on how quickly you respond to that request for additional information. So when you get that additional information request, it does state in that email that you have 10 business days. So if you don't happen to submit that, after 5 business days, the SDRE can send you a reminder that says that they still need that information and that now you have 5 business days to submit it. So that's what this email is letting you know. It's giving you the link again to submit it. And it's letting you know you have 5 business days from the date of this notice. And it's also giving you your reference number. And it's letting you know that, you can contact federal PPDR questions at cms.hhs.gov for any questions. So that's one that you may or may not get depending on how quickly you submit your additional information. And then finally, in this second scenario, you will eventually get a dispute determination notice. And I'm not going to go through this in detail because we did do that in the first scenario, but just know that that is letting you know that the process is complete and a determination has been made. So now I'm going to go ahead and toggle back to my slides. And let's talk a little bit about scenario number 3. So for scenario number 3, this is a situation where a settlement is reached outside of the PPDR process. So back in scenario 1, when I first showed you the first email, which is the payment dispute is eligible for dispute resolution, it does speak in there about the fact that the patient and provider can reach a settlement outside of the process at any time. And it gives you a link to submit the settlement information. So if that would happen, this is kind of what the email path would look like for that scenario. So in this scenario, the provider or facility and patient reach a settlement outside the PPDR process. As a provider, you would still receive that initial email, the payment dispute is eligible for dispute resolution, letting you know that it's eligible and to submit that the initial information request. If after that point, if you do reach a settlement and you basically what you would do is you would go back to that first email, and I'll show you this in a demo, and you would click on that settlement hyperlink that's in there, and you would complete the settlement information web form. Once that is completed, you would get email number 2 listed here that says, we've received your PPDR settlement form. So if you would reach a settlement, and that settlement could come, after you've submitted your initial information, it could possibly even come after you've submitted additional information. But once you submit that settlement form, this is the email that you'll get. We've received your PPDR settlement form. So it's just letting you know that that settlement information was received. If after reviewing that settlement information, the SDRE decides that maybe they want some more information or they need some more information about your settlement, you would get an email similar to the one that we just demoed asking for additional information. So that web form would be the same web form asking for additional information, just like we had in the scenario number 2. And then eventually, you still would receive a PPDR dispute determination notice letting you know the outcome of the dispute. So even if it's a settlement, it would let you know that the settlement has been reached. So that's kind of an example of a potential settlement scenario. So now what I'm going to do is just like we've been doing, I'm going to go back to my emails and walk you through what these might look like. So this is the initial email. This is the payment dispute is eligible for dispute resolution process. And we did walk through this in more detail for the first scenario, but I'm going to scroll down to that section where it starts talking about settlements. So if you do decide to settle at any point, you would want to come back to this initial email that you received and then go to this settlement link. That's going to take you to the settlement web form where you can provide the required documentation. So that's what we're going to demo now. So I'm going to demo for you that settlement form, and then we're going to come back and walk through the rest of those emails. Just bear with me for 1 second. Okay, so this is what the patient provider settlement form will look like. Very similar to the other 2 we looked at. It has the CMS logo on the top left hand corner. It says patient provider settlement form. So this says, welcome. Use this form if you're a provider or facility to report that you and the uninsured or self-pay individual or the individual's authorized representative have resolved a payment dispute outside the dispute resolution process. Inform the selected dispute resolution entity that you and an uninsured or self-pay individual have reached a settlement no later than 3 business days after the settlement date, and provide the agreed upon payment amount. If you have any questions before starting this form, you could reach out to federal PPDR questions at cms.hhs.gov. This is also letting you know here that you may need to upload things, that there is a 500 MB file size limitation for each file. And it's just letting you know that, make sure that you have your documentation ready and that it meets these limitations. You'll also want to provide your dispute reference number, the account number under dispute, the agreed upon settlement amount and date, and documentation signed by or from the patient agreeing to the new payment amount. And the reminder here is that you will be timed out after 15 minutes of inactivity. So again, we highly recommend that you kind of have everything together before you start completing the web form. So for the settlement process, it's letting you know that step 1 is completing and submitting your settlement response using this form. You will receive an acknowledgement email. The selected dispute resolution entity will review a response, confirm receipt of documentation, and notify you if the case is closed or required settlement information is missing. So that's basically, what I was saying, that you might receive another email if they need more information from you. So I'm going to scroll down here again and confirm that I agree to the terms and conditions. click continue. And then I'm going to enter my dispute reference number here for this example. And this is taking me right to the form. It says notice of payment settlement to select a dispute resolution entity. I'm going to have to enter in here the date. So for this example, I'm just going to say, let's say we reached it yesterday, and maybe we reached it for $250. And then I'm going to scroll down. And this is where it's going to show me some information about the patient, healthcare provider information. And then this section here where it says I have included check 1, all respondents will need to upload one of the following documents. So I can either upload documentation signed by the patient and agreeing to the new patient amount, or documentation from the patient agreeing to the new patient amount in the form of an email, letter, or fax. So let's say I have it as an email. I can click upload files again and just select the file. And you see here, it is selected, it is added. And then I'm gonna acknowledge that I'm sending this form to the SDRE, the patient or authorized representative, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services by uploading it to the No Surprises website. And then I'm gonna go ahead and click submit. And it's telling me here that once I submit, the SDRE entity will confirm receipt. So we'll get that confirmation email, and then it will let you know if there's anything that is missing, and then you'll get that final determination notice as well. And as always, if you have any questions, email federal PPDR questions at cms.hhs.gov. So I'm going to go ahead and click submit. This looks pretty similar to the other 2 web forms that we did as well. And it's saying you've completed the process for submitting your payment settlement, and it gives you the next steps. Again, the SDRE will verify your response. We'll get a confirmation email. If you want to print what you submitted, you can do print PDF. To exit, click exit. If there are questions or if additional information is needed, you will get potentially an additional information request email. And then you can go ahead and click exit. And that's going to take us back to that same email. So now that we've walked through that form, let's go back to our emails just so we can walk through the rest of the emails that you might get for this scenario. So once you submitted that settlement form, you'll get an email that says we've received your PPDR settlement form. And this is just letting you know that they received it and then it's going to be reviewed. If the SDRE will determine that they need additional information, you may get an email like this that says more information is needed for your billing settlement. And then you would select the link that's here, and it would be the same web form that we did in the second scenario where it's asking for additional information. And then finally, at the end, you will get a PPDR dispute determination notice, which will outline, how the dispute was resolved. So that takes us to the end of the 3 scenarios that we had to walk through this process. So hopefully that helped you see the different emails that you might receive and a couple of different scenarios that could potentially happen, along with what the web forms look like that you will fill out, throughout this process. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Josh Annis, and he is going to close us out today.
Thank you, Katie. Great information. And so this concludes the PPDR provider process demo, and we hope you found this information very useful. In closing, we'd like to stress again the importance of providing accurate contact information on your good faith estimate in the event that you are subject to a payment dispute with an uninsured or self-pay patient. If you have questions or would like additional information about the PPDR process, please feel free to reach out to us at our No Surprises Help Desk at 1-800-985-3059 or visit us online at our No Surprises website at cms.gov/no surprises. Thank you.